I believe every person is seeking fulfillment, happiness. When you peel it all back, people just want to be content.
On this episode of Garry Talks, I'm joined by Denise O'Brien, Solo Businesswoman of the Year and founder of O'Brien Learning Solutions. Denise is a powerhouse of resilience, purpose, and entrepreneurial drive. After navigating early motherhood, personal loss, and redundancy from a 20-year corporate career, Denise is constantly turning challenges into opportunities.
We have the wisdom we need within us. Sometimes we just need help to unlock that. They teach us is that the heart actually should lead, and then you use your logic, and your gut is where you get the courage to actually make the change.
Is there any sort of conclusion that you've come to at the moment then that you're happy to share?
I feel my story is about really, in many, many ways, coming out of the darkness and into the light.
This is a GK Media podcast. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Garry Talks. Before we dive in, a massive thank you for tuning in. Last year, Garry Talks hit #1 in Apple Podcasts entrepreneurship category here in Ireland. And we even reached #3 in business. That's all thanks to you, our incredible listeners. This year, we'd love to go one step further and take that #1 business spot. So, if you can support the show in any way, we'd really appreciate it. Whether it's sharing this episode, leaving a review, or just telling a friend, every little bit helps. Each episode costs around €1,000 to produce, and we've now released over 100 shows, all in the hope that these conversations deliver something valuable for you to invest back into yourself. So, follow us on social media, drop us a message, and don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like to support the show further. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you enjoy today's episode of Garry Talks.
This podcast is part of the GK Media Studios Creators Network, helping people tell their stories. Become a storyteller today and learn about our podcaster network at gkmediastudios.com.
Denise O'Brien, welcome to Garry Talks.
Thanks for having me, Gary. It's lovely to be here.
Well, thanks for coming all the way to Galway today.
No bother.
Change is a big thing.
Yes.
And we've spoken a few times before, and I think all the stories that you've spoken about has always been about change. Dealing with change, embracing change, accepting change,
Yes.
and so on. And I think with this episode, what we want to do is help people understand and accept that change is a part of life, and you've had to go through many situations that you didn't want to maybe deal with and accept at the time,
Yeah,
but you've come through them.
absolutely. Yes.
So let's go back to
Okay.
who was Denise in her early 20s?
Okay, so Denise in her early 20s was going through a huge change in her life. I had a fairly turbulent early adulthood, you could say. And at that stage, unfortunately, I had lost a loved one through suicide. I had dropped out of college. I had to question my relationship with alcohol at that stage, and my mother was terminally ill. So yeah, but early 20s, kind of a little bit down the road, then I found myself pregnant as well. So yeah, so there was now there's a lot of talk in the media about trauma. Gabor Mate, he's the expert. Everybody loves to listen to him, including myself. So that was pretty traumatic, but I didn't realize it at the time, to be honest, how traumatic it was. But yeah, so that was the first baptism of fire I had in dealing with change in my life, I guess. Yeah.
So your partner, is it your boyfriend at the time?
A boyfriend at the time. Yeah. Now, the story, unfortunately, was that we had broken up, and within a short time, he took his own life. Yeah, look, that's a whole other story, but it was very tough for me at the time because I felt kind of responsible. He was very unwell mentally, obviously. I had moved away from Cork. I was trying to better myself and go back to my family. I left college. And yeah, that was the road he went down, unfortunately. So That was tough. It was very tough to accept that at the time. And especially being so young, I didn't have the coping skills.
Of course.
Yeah.
And you probably went through different transitions of grief then as well, from
I did,
maybe guilt to anger, and
there was everything. I remember, my mom, God rest her, having to come in to me at night and sleep in my single bed with me because I used to wake up upset that, he was gone, that I had, would dream that I was going to see him and he wasn't there. Yeah, so that was a pretty dark time. I feel my story is about really, in many, many ways, coming out of the darkness and into the light, and even when I work with businesses now and in using the model that I've developed in my business, it is about bringing clarity where there's chaos, and one of the things I realized early on was that I'm good at change, and I am resilient and adaptable. And eventually I realized this is actually what I've been called to do here, is to show people how to do it,
So you've left college.
Yeah.
You've lost your boyfriend. You found out that your mother, or your ex-boyfriend, you found out that your mother is terminally ill. How do you deal with that? And then how does Denise move forward in her 20s?
Yeah, so it was the first point where I realized, I wasn't going to be able to do this alone. And that is another part of the model that I talk about, with people I coach and in business. A big part of it is getting the support that you need. So the first thing is recognizing the signs. And the signs were there for me that things needed to change, how I was living my life needed to change. I don't look back with any criticism of myself because I realized I was trying to deal with an awful lot. But I got help, and there was help. When the thing with help is when you go looking for it, you realize there's tons of it there. And I met an amazing group of people that became like family to me, really, that helped me to completely change my life around, and I got a job. I went for an interview. I got a job. I remember going for an interview in Shannon where GE, one of the big names, had just opened its doors.
Yes.
And they were doing interviews up in the airport, so they didn't even have a building at the time. And I just remember being really honest with the guy and saying, yeah, I've dropped out of college, but I'm, willing to work really hard and I really want to learn. And he gave me the job. And that's where my career started. That was 1997. So I got the job. I got myself, on the pathway of, clarity and recovery, and got a lot of support, got a lot of help. And I was there to be with my mom in the last final years of her life, really. And I had my daughter in that period, when I was doing that little bit better. She came along. So
you raised her as a single mom?
I did, yeah. It's kind of delicate one, but I kind of chose to do that myself.
So you're looking after a baby and your mother at the same time?
I was, yeah. That was really...
And were you looking after yourself?
I was, because I had found the support groups that I needed, But back then it was, I suppose I didn't realize that all the trauma that I'd experienced in those few years was there, in my body and my mind. And I've done a huge amount of work personally, and I believe being in the line of work that I'm in, if you haven't done the work on yourself, you can only bring people so far as well, So I've done a huge amount of work, which started back then in my early 20s and continues to today, because you never arrive, like we spoke about that before.
Yeah.
Podcast. One can't really rest on one's laurels because things come up to bite you,
How do you deal with those then? What are the tools?
Okay, so the tools for me personally in my life have been, therapy, support groups, friendships, having really good, strong friends in my life. Eventually when I started out in my own business, I really valued good mentorship, invested in coaching, CPD. I'm a big fan of continuous learning. I'm always learning.
Yeah.
Reading, big part of my story then was the whole spiritual development of, my mind and my soul, if you like, and the body, obviously. But a big part of it was finding the answers I was seeking, and those big existential questions. Some of them which have been answered, some of them which haven't. But yeah, so I did a huge amount of work on myself and continue to do these days.
And was there a speaker, a guru as such, or a book, or was there one particular thing that really made a difference for you?
There's been many over the years. Louise Hay would have been a big one for me back in the day. So she wrote famous book, You Can Heal Your Life. And a friend of mine gave it to me years ago. I went on to become a trained facilitator of her work. That really got me started. I read all the old Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, Susan Jeffers. It's an old classic. Right up to modern times, everything from Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle. I got big into kind of non-dualism then. Spent a week in silence at one point, in a commune or kind of a group setting. Joined various spiritual communities, traveled to Mexico, Spain. I've studied a course in miracles for a couple of years. So the seeking levels were high, but what I found was a lot of the answers I was looking for in comfort. And that's the other part of my change model, is about psychological safety. So that's the piece for personal change and organisational change. People need to feel they're safe going through periods of change.
Okay.
And that's what that brought me. All the spiritual stuff that I sought.
So do you think, is that why having some sense of a spiritual belief is so important, because that gives one that psychological comfort when they feel they're alone as such?
Yes, I believe every person is seeking something. People will call it fulfillment, happiness. When I coach people, when you peel it all back, people just want to be content. When I work with organisational, teams, most people just want to feel supported by their manager.
Yeah.
It's very simple stuff.
Yeah.
I do believe everybody's seeking, and however we find that is up to each individual. I'm not here to push anything down anyone's throat, but that has been a very, very important and significant part of my life story. Yeah.
So is there any sort of conclusion that you've come to at the moment then that you're happy to share?
The answers we're looking for are actually within us. A guru, a teacher, a guide can be really, really helpful, but we must, which I've fallen guilty of myself, is not put them up on a pedestal, because people are people. You're still, even if teachers are meant to be enlightened or whatever, they're still people at the end of the day, and I've learned that the hard way, as part of a community at one stage where the leader, wanted me to sell everything and put all my everything into the community,
Wow.
So I had to walk away from that, which was the right decision for me. And that's another thing. My body, part of the thing I've learned is that we have the wisdom we need within us. Sometimes we just need help to unlock that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I studied along the way is a theory called multiple braining, MBIT for short. It was created in the last couple of decades. And it basically talks about how we have an intelligence, obviously our head brain, we have logic there, but our heart brain, we have a little kind of like a brain in our heart and in our gut, and we know that. There's a lot of talk about the gut brain. But the thing is, neuroscience has found that we have neural pathways that communicate, throughout these three intelligence centers in our body. So the head, the heart and the gut are there to help us. It's like our own inner GPS for decision making. And that's what I'm big on now, is helping people, whether it's organisationally or personally, to find that. Because if I know from my own experience, if you're looking outside all the time for the answers, you might be misguided or misled or confused or overwhelmed, because there's so much out there now, But I'm a big fan of getting the right help, but I'm also a big fan of tapping in to see, is this what I need? Is my gut telling me something else?
Yeah, but why do we default to the brain so much then? And we always say afterwards, why didn't I just listen to my gut?
I know. The brain obviously is the bigger of the three brains. There's a lot more neurons firing up there. We're also in a civilization in this side of the world that kind of reveres intelligence, academia, ever since we're small. we've been measured against our performance at school.
True.
I do think there's a bit of a shift now. You know, I think there's a different way of looking at things that the younger generations might be seeing a bit more, you know, different kind of schools, you know. My daughter's pregnant at the moment and
Congrats.
thank you. Yeah. So
So about to become a granny.
I know, in November, all going well.
More change.
But she's talking about, you know, either Steiner schools or homeschooling or whatever, you know, because I think there's a bit of a revolt against the system in ways, but we do overly rely. Now, logic, we need it. You know, it's obviously really important.
Yeah.
But if you think about an organisation without any kind of the heart or the gut, it can feel quite clinical and very transactional. And sometimes we can go through life that way as well. You know, because when I studied M-braining, what they teach us is that the heart actually should lead, and then you use your logic, and your gut is where you get the courage to actually make the change. You know, it's that I will say, you hear it in language, oh, I didn't have the guts to do that, or my heart wasn't in it. You know, if your heart isn't in something, is it ever worth doing? Probably not. You know, but sometimes we do it anyway. And look, I know necessity is kind of the mother of all things, including invention, but bills need to be paid and people just need to do a job and put their head down and get through it. But ultimately, if the heart isn't fulfilled, your heart's desires, what you're passionate about, what you value, you'll feel like there's something missing in your life. And that's what happens, you know. So
it's brilliant. So lead with your heart, use your brain for the logic side of things.
Yeah.
And use your gut for the courage to do it.
Exactly.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. So that's what I've learned. And I try to bring that into my teachings now when I work with organisations and people, because I think people need to know and trust themselves, you know, and especially in the kind of women in business field, which I've really gone into in the last couple of years, you know, since my business went from a sole trader to limited company, and I'm trying to grow that. Yeah. And did a lot of networking, really raised my profile. And
we'll get into your business.
Yeah, you get bombarded with advice is the point. And coming back to your own wisdom is really important.
Talk to me about your mother. What was your mother like?
She was beautiful, very witty. She was a Limerick City woman.
Okay.
Yeah, so I remember when I was a child going into the heart of Limerick City, into Ballinanty, to my granddad. My mom's mom unfortunately died as well when in her 50s, after I was born, which is very similar to my own story with my mom, you know. So I wouldn't have known my grandmother, but I remember my granddad was a gentleman. He would have been involved in local politics in Limerick, and he was involved in, you know, the workers' rights, the Labour Party. Very passionate about that. And my mum was just a lady, you know. They moved out to Shannon in the late 60s, early 70s, like a lot of people did. And my dad was from Limerick County.
And for those who don't know the history of Shannon, can you briefly just tell us how it evolved into a town?
So Shannon was Ireland's first ever new town, as they called it, which was just built from scratch. So there was no main street, there was no history, there was nobody from Shannon. Created by huge visionaries at the time. Brendan O'Regan was a 6 Mile Bridge man, and a lot of other people, built around the airport. And then the first ever duty free was in Shannon.
That's right, yeah.
And the tax-free zone built then for the industrial estate, and housing then just built to support that.
So a lot of people would have come from the Northern Ireland during the Troubles.
Yeah, a big Northern Irish contingent, which you know, my mother said her family used to think my brother and I had a bit of a Northern Irish twinge. I get asked, am I from Dublin? The accent is very hard to pin down because there were so many influences. There was a Chilean community as well.
Okay.
Northern Irish. I had friends from all over the country. But people look back at it very fondly because everybody that moved there was of a certain age and had young children. I've heard it been referred to as Tír na Óg at one stage. Okay. There was throngs of children to play with. It was really special growing up there. Yeah, so they came out there, and my mum, she did say to me later on that she always thought she'd move back into Limerick City because she was a real city girl at heart, but that never happened. So I now support Clare and the hurling, much to my Limerick family's dismay. But anyway.
The fact that she had a terminal cancer, or was it cancer? Sorry, I'm
She did,
assuming.
yeah. She had brain cancer. She was diagnosed in her late 40s and lived for about another 6 years, roughly. Yeah, so she did have periods of remission. But it started with brain surgery, once they realised what it was. And that surgery, they, didn't even know if she was going to survive that, but she did. Yeah, so she was a young woman.
And do you feel during those 6 years then you used the time to bond more, or were you trying to just brush it under the carpet and pretend it wasn't really happening?
I think at the very start, I was living in Cork. I had gone to Cork for college, and my mum would have been having the surgeries then and that, and I was just gone a bit wild at that stage. I wasn't coping well. But when I got myself well, I had absolutely beautiful times with her that I treasure now, because they were the last good times we had together. Even though she was sick, I was able to really appreciate the time that I had, because when I had my daughter Eva, she got to see her, she got to see me getting my own house. I got my own house, I got a mortgage, I went back to college, I got a job. So she got to see all that, so yeah, the treasured memories there, absolutely. So that gave me an appreciation for life, and the way things can be taken away, that we can't take people or things for granted.
And what about your dad?
Yeah, so my dad, he was widowed young, and he's great though. He's still referees football, Limerick League. I won't say what age he is now because he'll kill me, but you can work it out. But yeah, it was very hard for him, obviously, for all of us. The family kind of falls apart after something like that. But he had spent years obviously minding her and taking care of her, and I saw that. He was very dedicated. My parents were both very hardworking, working class, just worked hard to give us what they didn't have, a full education, things like that, which is why it was very hard for me to drop out of college, because the guilt would have been huge, at the time, that I really felt I failed. That was hard as well at that age. But I think I've built up a few brownie points now at this stage. But yeah,
quite impactful losses there, and at the same time, the beauty of life with the birth of your daughter Eva. And you got the job with GE.
I did.
So how long were you working with them?
I was there for, I'd say about at least 7 years after that. So I started out in travel insurance claims, and very quickly then I got into training and development, into learning and development. Went back to college, again working for a big multinational like that. The opportunities are great. And found my niche in training and development, as it would have been at the time. Trained the hordes of new people that were starting in the job, and just really started to learn my craft very young, and really grateful for all those opportunities. And stayed in Shannon, because I had Eva, moved around, not a lot, at the time. I did long stints in, 2 or 3 companies, and worked in learning and development predominantly, but there was a change at some point with the crash, and I moved into different roles then, operations management, change management, and learned even more. That was tough going, moving out of that role into other roles, but my role was gone. I was brought into a room one day and told, there's a new organisational structure and your role isn't in it, basically. But again, the safety net with these bigger companies is that if there's a job there that kind of suits you, that they'll place you into it.
Great. Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I'll take that. I followed pregnant ladies around for a couple of years. I took maternity leave covers, and eventually it came full circle, and I got a full-time job again at the same company.
So then you set up Learning Solutions in 2016.
I did. The redundancy finally came to fruition. So 8 years after the first time I was told I was made redundant, it was redundancy for real at that stage.
Did you always have this desire then to become self-employed, or were you like, oh no, I don't want to actually be made redundant?
No, it was. I knew the redundancy was coming. You know what? I actually had a desire not to do the 9 to 5 anymore. Because when I had Eva, I gave her over to a childminder when she was probably 2 months old back then. You had 2 or 3 months maternity leave. I had been doing it. I was probably a bit burnt out at that stage. And I remember looking at my peer group, the other management team members. We were getting a big redundancy. It was really generous. And they were going straight into roles like in the likes of Northern Trust, Pepper. That a part of me, I was just like, I actually can't do this again, you know. And actually, the manager who had said to me initially, the 8 years previously, that she was going to have to make me redundant, I outlasted her because I just toughed it out. I got other jobs. And she came to me when she knew I was being made redundant and said, would you come and work where I am now for this consultancy firm? And again, they offered me a full-time role and I refused it because I actually wanted to take the foot off the gas a little bit. And this one would have been full on traveling to the States. And I just thought, no. But I was terrified at the time. You know, going back to Louise Hay I mentioned earlier, I remember one of the affirmations I used to use was, I am safe, it's only change. You know, that was a big one that she used to talk about. And it kind of rewires your brain a little bit because change is meant to be scary.
Mm-hmm.
You're not meant to feel safe. Change kind of shakes up our nervous system a little bit, especially when you don't know the outcome.
Yeah.
So I remember walking around internally in the office, people would be like, oh, I got my job, you know, it's all sorted. And I just knew I couldn't do that anymore. And I used to be saying, I am safe, it's only change. And eventually they came back to me and said, okay, if you don't want the full-time job, would you do some freelance work for us? And that's where I started my business then, after I got my redundancy. So I had contract work there and they were very good to me for a number of years. That kind of gave me that safety net while I was trying to build my brand and figure out what I was doing.
So just to clarify, why did you not want to take on another full-time job? What is it that was
I wanted
that?
The freedom. I just wanted to be able to be at home a little bit more with Eva. Now, even though she was like about 12 at the time or whatever it was, I just wanted to slow down the pace a little bit. I needed a break, I felt. I suppose I'd been working since all that had happened in, you know, my early 20s.
Had you fallen into the trap, like many of us, of just working to avoid dealing with the trauma that you'd gone through?
I think it was some of that, you might call it a trauma response, you know, over trying to compensate or make up for last time, you know, going back to college, having the job, studying, taking on the roles, taking the promotions. But at the same time, I did always have support. You know, I did stay with my support groups. I always had good, solid friends I could confide in. Now, it didn't mean that it was easy, you know. Coming from that place of having a bit of a, you know, tumultuous relationship with things like alcohol, you know, I had to watch for that kind of behavior in other areas of my life, you know, and that took a lot of work. So I don't think I was doing the best I could, you know, but I was still always working on myself. And a lot of people that worked with me would not have known any of that. You know, that's where I learned resilience. You get up in the morning, you go to work. You might be feeling like you want to have an anxiety attack. You call a friend, you tell them how you're feeling, you get on with your day. You go home, you do the homework, the dinner. And then if you need to go, you know, to one of your groups, you go and you get some help. And then you get up and you do it all again the next day. So I did that for a long time, you know, where a lot of people wouldn't have known that that's how I was dealing with life, you know.
And would one of the support groups have been for alcohol? Yeah,
so I would have joined a 12-step fellowship when I was about 20 because I was suicidal at that stage. You know, I just wasn't, you know, those mind-altering substances and me just don't mix, you know. And then with all that trauma on top of it, it was, bringing me to a pretty dark place, you know. So I reached a rock bottom and help just came my way like one day, literally kind of, I feel it was divine intervention, you know, the way things happened. And I was brought into the fold of a group that helped me to, you know, have developed self-respect for myself again, dignity, compassion, forgiveness for myself. You know, that was a really big part of it. It was very hard for me to look back and see, you know, that I was so wayward and my mom was so sick, you know, and bringing additional stress on the family, you know, for those few years. So I could never be grateful enough that I got well while she was still alive. You know, that was a real gift.
Yeah.
But there's so much support out there now. So many different kind of groups, different type of 12-step groups. yeah, like I would say to anybody, just, and I know it's a big issue now, and I know there's all kind of substance abuse issues going on, you know, kind of throughout society. Doesn't matter now what age, background, social class. Again, notice the signs is what, you know, is what I would say is, I always knew when I was living that kind of a lifestyle, it was short-lived, thankfully, that it wasn't, like, something inside me was like, oh no, this is not for you. Like, you need to get out of this, or you're going to die, you know.
Yeah.
It was that serious, like, but I think that's the power of the human spirit. You know, there was a part of me that wanted to live and be well, but there was similarly a part of me that just was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that, you know.
So when you're going through a difficult time, we can use the alcohol to mask our pain, and we can use drugs to escape from
yeah,
it.
Exactly.
So when you're not taking alcohol or drugs, and then difficulty comes along the way, how do you cope with that?
Yeah, you dig really, really deep. You know, you have to face that part of yourself that you ran away from, you know, that wants to escape. And I think that's what most human beings find the hardest, is to sit and go, I feel really uncomfortable. I feel awful. This feels really uncomfortable. This is really hard. This is really painful. I don't want to feel this. You know, but I learned very early on in my life, a feeling just wants to be felt. If you feel it, if you say, yeah, I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack, I'm so anxious. Okay, well, now maybe I don't feel that level of intensity. It's dropping a little bit. And then the coping tools, you know, with the 12-step programs, anyone of your listeners who's been there will know there's a whole program of recovery, you know, but part of that is a faith in God. And I had a wonderful sponsor when I was very early days, and he's gone now. He taught me about a loving God. And controversially, he was anti-religion.
Okay.
But that blew my mind.
Yeah.
For the first time I was introduced to God without religion. And I just didn't think that was possible.
Yeah.
Now I've worked through that and kind of come full circle now. You know, I'm happy enough to go to mass these days. That's part of my story. It's not for everybody either. And he taught me about the teachings of Jesus without going anywhere near mass or Catholicism, which again was, for me, was revolutionary. You know, like, what was he actually trying to teach us?
Yeah.
You know?
What was it all about?
Yeah. And one of the things he used to say to me was, because I was riddled with guilt, you know, over the life I had lived, even though it was short-lived, as I said, but that kind of lifestyle, especially for young women, brings you to undesirable places, mentally and physically. And, you know, he used to say, you know, what did Jesus say when he was on the cross? I said, well, I don't really know. But he said, well, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. You know, and that, for whatever reason, really helped me in that particular moment to go, okay, maybe I'm not this worthless person I thought I was. You know, maybe there is hope, you know. And when that hope started to come back into my life, everything changed. You know, I think where there's hope, there's life. But I know that some people don't feel that, you know, and that's sad, you know. So that's what I try to bring when I'm with people, is that sense of hope. Not the Pollyanna type of optimism of just smile and everything is great. You know, it's not that. It's something else.
Yeah, that's what I was saying at the start, you know, who was Denise in her early 20s? Because I think that Denise today is so different from the Denise who was in her 20s. And in her 20s, you know, God love us, you know.
No, what do we know? Exactly. I just feel, for me, there were quite a few heavy blows in my early 20s that shaped, for better or for worse, you know, who I am today. Yeah, you know, that was heavy, significantly heavy going, like, and when I look back now, I'm just like, oh my God, that was a lot, you know, and I just thank God that I came through it and found the support that I found at that point in my life, you know, because it changed everything. Yeah.
So 2016, your daughter's heading into the teens.
Yeah.
You decide, well, you have no choice. You have to just set up your own business, go solo, as I did myself back in 2013. So we all know the joys of starting out on your own, trying to make something work.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about your journey. How was it for you?
Well, thankfully, I had a friend and a mentor who lived across the road at the time, and she was about 10 years further on down the road in this line of work. And I remember saying to her, you know, I was standing in my hall one day, I was like, okay, I'm doing this, you know, I've got this contract. I was like, I'll give it a year. And she said, no, you won't. I was like, huh? She said, you give it 2 years. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm just so scared, you know, but eventually I got into the rhythm of being self-employed. Peaks and troughs for sure. Even still now this year, this summer is quiet for me, you know, but I've known that for the last 9 years and it's always passed and it's always okay. But yeah, so
it's funny, because when you do hit the quiet periods, there is this massive panic attack going on. But at the end of the year, you know, it
actually works out.
It worked out.
I know.
But it's still, when you're in it, it's still so scary because there is that question, no matter how successful you are, oh my God, is this the year that everything just falls apart?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I still have moments like that, but maybe some of the tools I built up along the way have helped me to deal with that, you know, to kind of say, look, everything is actually okay, you know, and again, I am safe. It's only change. And I have to do that regularly. What's the worst that can happen? You know, I've gone through a lot of change in the business the last couple of years. That safety net of the subcontract work was gone, was fully me now, business to business. And you really, really have to answer tough questions for yourself. What am I doing? Why would people want to buy what I sell? Why me? What's my USP? I've gone through so much mentoring, coaching, you know, to the point of where you're just like, okay, just put on some blinkers now and put your head down and just keep going. Put one step in front of the other. But it's not easy. It's not for the faint-hearted, running your own business. You know, it really isn't. No.
What is it that your business does? Tell us.
Yeah, so my business now supports organisations that are going through periods of change. Surprise, surprise. But any organisation, really, it can be an SME who's gone through a growth phase, you know, employees moving from maybe 10 to 50 or 100 to the corporate organisations that are going through mergers, acquisitions, takeovers. When I started out, I had come out of the role as change manager, and the client that we had at the time was Lloyd's Banking Group. So that was really tough. I earned a few stripes there, like that was tough going. But I started to realise when I started my own business that, you know, it's such a cliche, but people are the essential ingredient when it comes to change projects. And I developed a little model back then, like nearly 10 years ago now, that I kind of kept to one side and then went off and taught everybody else's change models, you know, all the experts. And again, came full circle. You know, it's like I've got that trademarked now. It's in the process of being trademarked. It's a 3S model. So the signposting, support and safety. Those are the 3 pillars of the model that I use when I work with organisations and with individuals. But it's something that I had all along, you know, and I think that's just another indicator of how long it took me to trust myself in business, you know, and that's fine. You know, it's been a journey, as they say. But yeah, it was a bit of a full circle moment recently where I looked back and went, I had this all along, you know, and I doubted myself and I used other people's content, you know, I did this, that and the other. And now I'm here going, no, this actually works. And I believe in it, you know, and I've experienced it and I've brought teams through this process and it does work. So
if a business is going from maybe 10 to 40 or 50 employees, what sort of, I know there's a change, but what sort of issues do they face in that change?
So it's usually the main blocker I have found is the business owner. So that's me or you, you know, let's say in 5 years' time, you're ramping up to 100 people. I have a team of 50. It's very hard to get out of your own way and let go like of the baby and hand it over to somebody else. And those skills can be taught, but the one little thing that the business owner needs that I can't magic up is willingness. If you don't have that, I can't work with you really. A willingness to let go and say, okay, do you know what? I'm going to get out of the driver's seat. I trust you. Do what you got to do. So when I'm allowed or given permission to do that, and now I have a team of associates with me who have all different areas of expertise, like lean process improvement, sustainability, neuroscience, workplace wellness, all that kind of stuff. So it's not just me anymore going in. I really wanted to move away from that. If we're given permission to do that and the blessing of the owner, then you can really make magic happen, because usually what I find in these organizations is that there's usually a loyal core team of followers there that have followed this person. They've been there since the business was, run out of the living room or whatever it is, they've been well looked after, but they're kind of hungry to know, how do I become a leader? Like, what's expected of me? Where does my role begin and end? And that's where we come in, so I'm studying a master's at the moment in organisational behaviour in UL. So it's all about that, how to set up the organisation so that it feeds itself, and roles are clear. People know what they're doing. People know how to lead. There's a whole plethora of services that we offer, and it depends on where the gaps are,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So some companies would be strong, for example, on, okay, we have a strategic plan. We've done a lot of work with, Enterprise Ireland, or somebody has come in and we've built a plan, but nobody really is following the plan, So it's like, okay, it's a great on paper, or you have lovely values around the place, but people are behaving like God knows what, and that's tough work. It's hard work, but this is where we come in, we get our hands dirty and it's opening up all the cans of worms and going,
Okay.
yeah, it's hard, but it's really rewarding, because you have people, saying to us, now I have a management team who can make decisions. Now I have a management team who actually works independently of me as the CEO, which is what I need them to do, is what I'm paying them to do, but they just didn't have the confidence or whatever. If expectations are really clear and the skills development has been provided and people know where they stand, then you can really start to build a high-performing organisation, which is what part of our role, ultimately, what we love to do is bring organisations on the award-winning journey, to becoming like best in class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's when the wow factor really starts to happen.
It's an interesting question to go around and even ask your team today of what do you think is expected of you in your role.
Yeah, it is.
See
even
how,
if you
how
ask
clear
that
is for people.
I know, you'd be surprised. And some people get afraid that we're going to take away the lovely flexibility that they have. It's kind of, well, we kind of operate now. If I need someone to step in and do this, they step in. It's not about taking away what's working really well, but it's about building on that and saying, okay, using a sports analogy, if every player on the field knows their role and knows their position, it doesn't mean they're not going to go down the other side of the pitch and score maybe at once in a while, but they have to get really good at what they do first and foremost, and that most people will understand that and go, okay, fair enough, right, show me how do we do that, so you're not taking away the agility, and that's where the behaviors come in, so that's part of the work we do, is to help people to signpost. This is the first S. What does good look like around here? You tell us. We're not going to tell you that. So we do a lot of work. It's very consultative, focus group. Being part of the change is really important for everybody in the organisation, however small. If it's a team of 5 or 500, it's asking people, what's it like to work here? And most people have really nice things to say, but they will also have things that they go, well, if we could stop doing this or that now, So we go in and build a little bit of trust, a bit of rapport, try and help people to get to this, and then begin to look at, okay, so what does good look like? And let's see if we can document that, and let's see if we can start to get people emulating that. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah.
So it's the whole process, But sometimes it's a quicker fix. Sometimes people want, okay, we've got a new management team here, we need to train them. That's fine, we do that, Other times people need more than that, So that's the beauty of the model that we have. It's a bit like an a la carte menu. It's not a one size fits all,
I suppose it's a quick process if the organisation has a habit of having that open communication and transparency taking place.
Yeah, that can be quicker.
Yeah. But again, I've come across, and I'm sure you have as well, so many organisations that purposely blind themselves to the issues and don't encourage open discussions, and it just festers.
It does,
simmers,
yeah.
and creates an awful
becomes
bad
a bit
culture.
toxic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, you need a strong sponsor at the top who can actually make decisions, who does influence the budget, the purse strings. And when that happens, you can create, I know it's a bit, people go, how can you really though? Like, do people actually really like going to work? And the answer to that is yes. You can create a culture where people feel connected, supported, that they can thrive, they can learn. And it's not about everybody going around being nice to everybody all the time. Like, it's not that. If you're going to be a good leader, manager, you need to be able to say to someone, listen, what I'm seeing is not exactly where I need you to be. I need you to be here, you're there. I can help you get there, but I need you to know that that's not cutting it at the moment or whatever.
Yeah.
And we help people to have those difficult conversations as well. How do I give feedback? How do I give constructive feedback? People avoid that like the plague. And
100%.
especially in Ireland, I think we're terrible at that.
Yeah.
Tone is really important in those conversations if we were to go into it. But, it can be done. We have case studies where people have, completely changed the culture or really built on the little successes they've had to build a thriving business where people do feel part of. Mostly when I come into organisations and I meet the team, they'll always say to me, oh, we've done something like this before and it didn't work. Like, you hear that a lot.
Okay.
Or you're never going to change them. Are they going to be on this program because they need that, And ideally we'll be able to say, yes, this is not just, I try to avoid work where I'm brought in to fix a certain person or a certain cohort, because it never happens in a vacuum.
Yeah.
There are usually organisational factors. Not saying that it's a person that's to blame, but it could be, you don't have a plan. The roles aren't established clearly, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it can be complex, but usually where there's people, a lot of the similar issues start to emerge.
And you're nearly 10 years in business, and we were having this discussion before we started recording that you nearly feel like you're starting out again because you're going from that thing of being a sole trader to scaling out your business, bringing in associates, remodeling the structure of your business and so on. So it's gone back to scary times again, just when you're beginning to settle.
It's a couple people I've met recently think I've only started in business in the last year or two, because I suppose when I was doing the mix of subcontract work and my own work, I didn't have to have a high profile. I didn't have to really publicize my business a lot. But the downside of that is you're spending a lot of your time working with someone else's clients. Like, they're not your clients and you're not developing your business and blah, blah, blah. So eventually I did have to ask myself, okay, what are you doing with the business? And I just thought, this is my fighter spirit, I suppose. I really want to give this full throttle of proper shot, or otherwise I'll be kicking myself. You'll never know unless you try.
Yeah.
What would it be like if, you got your IP trademarked, you built a team of associates, you had something different in the marketplace. You might write the book eventually. What would that be like? Those are the things of dreams for me. And some of those are already happening,
Brilliant.
So it's like, I suppose one of the other things I got from all the work I've done is one of the things that actually it's in A Course in Miracles, which I think is beautiful, is like, you are worth the consistent effort. Don't give up on yourself. That is somewhere, I think, emblazoned in my brain somewhere. You're worth the consistent effort.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to what you said earlier as well, is we need to respect ourselves more.
Yeah.
I heard someone giving an advice yesterday to a friend who is just struggling with their weight at the moment. And they were saying, you have to value yourself. You have to drink the good water. You have to eat the good food. You have to value yourself, look after yourself, make yourself a priority. We all deserve the best quality food.
Yes.
But
we don't do
we
that.
don't, because we
Why?
have this self-destructiveness within us.
We do. Yeah.
But everyone in this world deserves the best of everything. But we don't do that. We don't give that opportunity to ourselves. We need to learn to respect ourselves more.
We do. And I think allow ourselves the right to be happy. Whether we call it a hangover from Catholic guilt, or, I think, again, another thing I've learned from all that additional work I've done on myself is that usually what's at the heart of most discontent is a feeling of worthlessness. If you strip it back, it's a feeling of being not enough. And, Gabor Mate would talk about being disconnected, from yourself, from others, from God, I would say as well. I know the God word can be, some people don't want to hear about that, but that's my own experience, whatever you want to call it, a higher power, the universe, fairies, angels, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's actually the same thing people are talking about. So you're worth the effort, that sense of worthlessness can be healed and repaired in my experience. And, there are people and tools out there that can help, Is it an overnight thing? No. But it's, at the end of the day, you have to listen. That voice that told me, no, I want to live, is that voice like of the human spirit that I said earlier. And we all have that. Every single person has that. That little flame, a little spark inside that's like, no, go on, like you're worth it, like do it.
Yeah.
That has to prevail. And I know in dark times that sometimes gets silenced, and that's sad, when people decide they're going to opt out or whatever. For those of us that are here, I do think we need to, people talk about that, don't they? Feeding the black dog or the white dog, or we have a choice. We do have a choice about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think if we look after ourselves more, that worthlessness diminishes more. I
think so. And I think for me as well, the sense of worth is tied to my spiritual wellness as well. So my connectedness to myself and higher power or whatever. From a lot of the work I did, I got this something that can't be taken away by anything or anybody, which is a sense of calm at the center of my being, I think, and while life can be choppy and sad and upsetting and people can come and go, and, the thing I got from the work that I did was that sense of wellness, that I feel everybody has, but some people don't know yet that it's there, and nobody or nothing can take that away, which is pretty cool. So. But
you know what you're about as well. You were saying that you're all about an advocacy for change, and that change is part of life and so on. And even you're involved in a lot of community work. So it's even knowing what our purpose.
Yeah, the purpose drives everything. Yeah. The community work I do, similarly, I do love Shannon. I think it gets a bad rap, because it's the town that's been forgotten. It needs more investment. Being on the board of Shannon Community Partnership allows me to have some influence in bringing people together to form a network, of community members who feel they can actually advocate for change and who feel they can actually have a voice. So that's all really, really important for me, is having a voice myself, even coming here telling my story, from start, including everything.
Yeah.
It's not something I always do. And allowing other people to have a voice, and sometimes being the voice for other people as well,
And it's that sense of giving then as well that makes us have purpose and
I think
feel worth within ourselves.
I think it's really important. I don't think any person is more at their best than when they're giving freely of something. And it's like that, almost like that, being in that state of flow, you forget about yourself.
Yeah.
And I don't mean giving like to the point of being a doormat or being a big do-gooder for the sake of it.
Yeah.
I mean, giving with heart when you can, when it's okay for you to do that. It's a nice mix, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Denise, continued success with Learning Solutions.
Thank you so much. It's been great to be here, and it's been lovely to talk to you.
This is a GK Media podcast.